me going back to. She'll be scared and weak. Take care of her for me, Kyle.
Come with me if you want to live. Now, soldier!
This is all wrong. John sent me here to save you.
From the Terminator that was sent back to kill me, I know, but we already took care of him.
We?
I've been waiting for you.
The time John sent you to, it no longer exists. Everything's changed. We can stop Judgment Day from happening. Run! Where is he?
I'll be back.
What?
I'll be back. That's it. That's the only important. My Austrian accent is horrible, so don't forgive me for that. We're glad you're here for this message series for Summer Blockbusters. This has been fun all summer. We love this series because each and every message kind of stands alone, but it really pulls the spiritual themes out of the summer's hottest movies, and we hope you've been going to see these. The trick in this is to find God where you're at. You don't have to be in a Bible study or with a bunch of Christians or at church or anything to find God, to hear from God. God is speaking to us all the time if we can just have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. And in the movies are a perfect place to do this. I heard Stephen say it the other day. These are like modern day parables. They are, because they all carry a theme, and they carry a very heavy spiritual theme, and this movie was no different. So how many people went to go see Terminator Genesys? How many people went to go see it? No? Really? A couple? Just a couple? Really? Wow, great movie, man. It's an awesome movie. You guys are missing it. And it has some of the, if you've seen some of the other Terminator movies, there's kind of a, it's the same thing but a rerun. It's the same thing but a little bit different with a little twist. And it has some of the same characters, of course. There's T-800. There's Arnold. Arnold's back. He's a good robot this time. He's a good robot. He plays kind of a couple different parts in here, but he's a good robot this time. So T-800 is the original Terminator. He's back in there. And of course, you have Kyle and Sarah. Kyle is a soldier from the future that's come back to save Sarah. Sarah Connor is the mother of the leader of the resistance who in the future will fight all the Terminators and kill them and win back the world for humanity, and that's John Connor. Now, what's different about this is you get to see things more from John Connor's perspective, from Kyle's perspective, from Sarah's perspective that you didn't get to see in the first one. And how many people have seen any Terminator movie ever? All right, so you kind of understand the theme here. Okay, this is probably a better question. How many people have never seen a Terminator movie? Oh, you poor things. You have just missed out. And it's this wonderful thing. It's this wonderful kind of science fiction thing. I'll just break it down for you real quick. Sarah Connor in 1985 is doing just fine. She's like a girl in her early 20s. She's living on her own, having a good thing. And robot from the future, Arnold Schwarzenegger, comes back to kill her. She doesn't know why, but Kyle comes back from the future to save her. Okay, so what had happened is at some point in the future, mankind had created this program that got a life of its own and came back and attacked humanity. Even in the movie, they say this. In the movie, they say, they used our own bombs against us. So this program was the end result of years of humanity wanting to be in control of everything. Wanting to, it was from our own greed and all this, and this thing became self-aware and came back and used our own weapons against us. And because Sarah was going to be the mother of the leader of the resistance, this machine sent something back in time to kill her and take her out. And once it took her out of the picture, there would be no resistance. And what's funny about it is that Kyle, the guy that comes back to save her, is actually John Connor's father. All right, so spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it all. All right, so there, sorry, I ruined the whole series for you now. And these are, why would I do it? She said, why would you do that? All right. But these aren't the characters I want to talk about. There's a new character in this movie, and it's a character I think we need to pay attention to because it's the embodiment of all that is wrong with humanity. It's the embodiment of all our greed and all our avarice and all our desire for control. It's you can call him T-5000 because he's the ultimate Terminator. You can call him Skynet, but usually you just call him Terminator Genesys. That's his name. That's his handle. He is the embodiment. He's the ultimate of all our desire for control coming back on us and destroying us. He is the ultimate Terminator. And it's a part of this movie, and you need to pay attention to this guy because Terminator Genesys holds a very, very, very deep spiritual theme for us too. And if you look at this through a Christian lens, you look at what is a part of us, a part of our own creation that comes back and haunts us time and time again and gets us trapped in a cycle. You could call it evil. You could call it sin. You could personify it and call it the devil if you want. But that's what this character plays. And time again, it comes back to haunt us. Time and time again, it comes back to wreck our lives, to destroy things. And ultimately, it'll build up to the point where it just overtakes us. And the wages of sin are death. That's what this guy represents. And that is, and we don't like to think about it. We don't like to think about something of our own creation coming back to destroy us, but it does. It does. And so the question is, what happens when humanity's sin gets so big that it becomes almost self-aware and you can almost personify it and call it Satan, and it comes back and starts to destroy us wholesale? What happens? Well, you know what happens is a thing called Judgment Day. Judgment Day. Now, we don't like to talk about judgment. Judgment is kind of a taboo subject among some Christians because it makes us uncomfortable, right? We don't like to talk about Judgment Day. We don't like to, when we think about Judgment Day, we're thinking about like the Old Testament God. Like somehow God got nicer like a grandpa, and into the New Testament became more grace-filled and everything. And when we talk about judgment, we think about that Old Testament God because there's a lot of judgments that happen in the Old Testament. But I think when we do that, it's a failure to read grace into that Old Testament God because that's the same God. God didn't change. And Jesus talks a lot about judgment. We don't like talking about those parts, but it's there. And so it's the same God all along, and it's a failure to see judgment on one end, and it's a failure to see grace in the God on the other end. And judgment, man, when it comes to judgment, we're really ambivalent. We really have mixed feelings because we want judgment for some people, don't we? There's some people, let's just say it, there's some people in this world right now that need some judgment, right? They need some God to come down and kick butt and take names, right? We need the judgment God right now on some people in this world. They are just bad news. They are just evil. They need to go, and they need to go now, and we don't know what the holdup is, but God, you need to take care of some of these people. Some of these ISIS cats or whatever. Beheading people? I mean, come on. Judgment needs to happen. See, we want that kind of judgment. We want judgment on people that we deem as evil, but we don't want judgment for ourselves. Whoa. Wait. You mean it gets spread across the board even? No. See, we want grace for ourselves, right? We want grace for ourselves, but we want judgment for people we think are qualified for it, and somehow, somewhere along the way, we make ourselves judge a lot, and it's not our job. We're not qualified to do it. The only one that's qualified to become judge is God. The only thing God asks us to do is offer grace to people. We're not to judge them at all because when we do it, we mess it up. We're not qualified. We don't have a sense of grace that God has. And so today we're going to talk about a judgment day, not the judgment day, but a judgment day. A judgment day that happened in the Old Testament, and we're going to see a God of grace and judgment in action in the Old Testament, and it's a place called Sodom and Gomorrah, and some of you might know this story, right? And God destroyed it with brimstone, right? It rained down fire on it and just decimated the place because it was so evil, it was so broken that it was beyond redemption. It was beyond saving. It had become so infected with its own sin that it was beyond redemption. Can you imagine that? You know, in the movie, John Connor looks out across right before the final battle, and he looks at him. He says, I look out among you, and I look at you, and I see the scars, the marks of this long and terrible war. I see the marks of this long and terrible war, and it's enough. We've done enough. We've suffered enough, and judgment had to happen. And judgment on Sodom had to happen. Now, let me set it up a little bit for you. God is with a man called Abraham, and Abraham's a pivotal figure in history. 3 different religions, modern-day religions, came from Abraham. Judaism and Islam and Christianity came from Abraham. We're in all of their traditions. So Abraham's a pivotal figure, and God had come to visit Abraham to talk about the future and talk about how he's going to bless him. And then the 2 angels that were speaking for the voice of God turned and looked off, and they said this to Abraham. They said, the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, and their sin is so grievous, that I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. In other words, people have been praying. Such grief and such scars and such pain have been poured out at God and say, you've got to stop this place. You've got to judge this place. You've got to stop them, God. That God himself came down to see if it was as bad as he thought. And Abraham stopped him on the way, stopped his angels at least. And he said, listen, God, if there's some righteous people there, you're not going to judge it if there's some righteous people there, right? And see, Abraham had a problem, because his nephew, Lot, a grown man with his own family and his own stuff, had moved down to that area. And so Abraham didn't want it judged if Lot was there. And see, that's the way we want judgment when there's bad things going on, but when it's one of our own, it's a little different story, isn't it? We want some grace for them. We want them to be saved. We want, and that's the way we are. We don't mind casting judgment on people we see as evil, but what if it's one of our own that's caught up in the middle of it? We don't want that happening. And so Abraham prays for Lot, and the angels said, we've got to go. It's too great. The problem is too big. I'm hearing too much. I've got to go check this out and see. And so they go. They go down to Sodom and Gomorrah, to this town that is caught in this cycle of sin and just horrific actions. Some of the things that are happening, this is a town you don't want to be caught in after dark. And I don't know what's going on here, and I don't know how it got so bad, but it got to the point where God had to go check it out himself. And he walks, and these 2 angels walk into the town, and the first person they meet is Lot, standing at the gates. And Lot's a pretty stand-up guy, right? And in their culture, in that Middle Eastern culture of the time, hospitality was a huge thing. It was your whole reputation was based upon hospitality and things like that, and how you could greet strangers and pull them in and stuff like that. And Lot's sitting at the city gates, and he stops these 2 guys that are about to walk in. He doesn't know they're angels. And he says, listen, you guys got to come home with me tonight. Why don't you come into my house? And at first, it's just a gentle invitation. And they're like, no, we're going in, and we're going to spend the night in the middle of the town square. And he said, ooh, you don't want to go there. You don't want to be caught here after dark, right? You ever been in one of those neighborhoods? You don't want to be here after dark, right? And he's like, you don't want to do that. You guys need to come. And he insists. And even though they're pretty insistent, he's insistent more. And he's like, you got to come home, because hospitality is everything to Lot. And so he's a stand-up guy. He's bringing them home. He's trying to keep them safe and everything. And yet the townspeople of this town got wind that there were some strangers in town. And they come and they start beating on Lot's door. They're like, let us have him, let us have him. And it's like this prison scene where the prisoners have taken over. The inmates are in charge of the asylum, and they've come to grab these 2 strangers, and they're beating on the door, and they say, let us have him. We want to have sex with them. We want to rape them like that. And it's just one of the most horrific scenes in the Bible, these people beating on the door. And it's where we get the term sodomy, right? It comes from Sodom and Gomorrah. And for years, people have made this one story about homosexuality. And I just say that's kind of a basic surface level reading of this. This isn't about homosexuality. Homosexuality isn't the sin that's addressed here. That's in other places in the Bible. The sin that's here, see, homosexual rape is the mode, correct. But the sin The sin is something much more insidious, something that rides underneath that propels people to do something so horrible that this town is just infected so bad with this sin that it's irredeemable at this point. And that's the sin of objectification. And we need to get that straight in our head. Don't read things into the Bible that aren't there. There's a sin that's driving this, and it's a sin of objectification. And objectification is looking at anybody that's different than you, not one of yours, outside of you or your race or whatever, outside of your group, and saying, because you're not part of us, you are less than. I can treat you like an object now. You're not a human being with any value. And in fact, at its worst objectification, I can use you because you're not a real person. You don't have as much value as me. Do you see it? You weren't from here, so we get to do whatever we want to you. That's objectification. And if you think that's not part of our world now, you're fooling yourself. It's so much a part of the culture that we live in and day out of our planet, this objectification. What about racism? We thought, oh, wow, we had the civil rights movement. We did all these things. We celebrate all these great people that helped make that happen. We don't have racism anymore. Really? Really? Do you forget South Carolina? Do you forget all these towns where horrible things happen to black people simply because they happen to be born black and born in that neighborhood? Do we forget racism that easy? That's objectification at its worst. That's saying because you look different than me, because your skin color is different than mine, you are less of a human being. We live in this. We live in this culture. And if you think it's gone, you're fooling yourself. You are fooling yourself. What about classism? Oh, we've all done this, right? Because I happen to be born into a certain level and I live in a certain place, I'm better than those that live in less than me, right? We like doing that. People that live in government housing or people that live in trailers. How many jokes have been told about that? Just because that person happened to be born into that place in life, somehow, some way, they're not as important as me. We live in this. We think like this all the time. What about nationalism? Just because someone wasn't born in the United States, somehow, some way, they aren't due the blessings that I am because I happen to be born here. Sorry about your luck, loser, right? I mean, my son-in-law is Canadian. I give him mess all the time, right? Just because he's Canadian and I'm American. I'm his father-in-law, and I get to do that, right? It's my job. It's on my job description. And so I get mess all the time, and oh, well, it's Canadian. He's one of us, right? Why? Because he's white and he speaks English? What if he was African or Indian or Mexican? Would you think any different about him then? Would he be worth any less to my family then? We do it all the time. We give ourselves permission to wage war in countries simply because they're not us. And they might have what we want. What about gender discrimination? Ladies, how much do you make on the dollar compared to men? 70 to 80 cents on the dollar still? Well, sorry, you were born with the wrong equipment. Right? We live in this. We are infected with this. This is all part of our world. It's part of who we are. And we think we're better than this. We look at this with disgust, but we're no better than this. What about the worst form of objectification that's is so a part of our culture, we just smile and nod at it? What about pornography? It's getting personal now, isn't it? And you might sit there and think, oh, well, it's no problem. I'm not hurting anybody by doing this or looking at it. It's teaching you to objectify people. It's teaching you that. It's teaching you that that person is an object for my pleasure. And when we allow our kids to get online and we don't monitor that, and they're increasingly, exposed to this pornography, we're teaching our kids to treat people as objects. And if you think, well, these people get paid to do it and they want to do it, you know nothing about the porn industry. Objectification at its worst. We're teaching people how to objectify people, how to treat people as objects. It's horrible, it's sinful, it's evil, and it needs to stop. It needs to stop. And we wonder why we are the way we are. We're just as infected as they were. And you might sit there and think to yourself, well, I'm not a bad person. I'm not a part of all that. I was just kind of born into it and stuff. God doesn't call us to be slightly better. God calls us to be different. It's the same sin. It's just a different scale as here. And Lot was no different. He was a stand-up guy, right? He invited these people in. He did all this. And you don't think that had infected him living in that culture? Oh, yeah, it did. Listen to what happens. I'm sorry, this is a quote from the movie. It says, I was born into a broken world. I just want us to know that's us too. Listen to what Lot does. So Lot steps outside, right? Can you even imagine yourself doing this? There's a gang wanting to break in your house and steal your guests and do horrible things to them, and you step outside, right? That's a stand-up move right there. Step outside. He steps outside. He says, please, my brothers, he begged, don't do such a wicked thing. And that would have been good if he'd have stopped right there. Yeah. He says, look, I have 2 virgin daughters. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do with them as you wish. But please leave these men alone, for they are my guests and are under my protection. Really? When your reputation is more important than your own kids, you got a problem. When your kids are less than, you've got a problem. You are part of the problem. You are part of the infection. When you throw your own children under the bus, you're every bit as much the cycle as the people beating down your door. He was just as infected, and God said, if there was one righteous person there, I won't destroy the town. There wasn't. Not one. Not one was righteous. Not even Lot. It's all part of the problem. The good thing about God, though, is that almost always, at some point in your life, he will offer you a way out. He will show you the door. He will say, run this way, go this way, do this. Don't stay in this bad, infected cycle that you find yourself in. Get out. God wants everyone to come to repentance. You wonder why God's so slow to pass judgment day now? It's because he wants everyone to have a way out, everyone to have a chance to choose to go. God always offers us off-ramps, and you might not want to see them, but they're there. And I don't know if it was because of his uncle's prayer or because he tried to sort of do the right thing or just God's grace, but God offered Lot a way out. And so the angels blind all these people that have come to manhandle them. And they grab a hold of Lot, and they seized his hand and his wife and his daughters, and he rushed them to safety. He said, get out right now. He said, the Lord was merciful. I love this scripture right here. The Lord was merciful. We think this God of judgment isn't merciful. And one of the angels ordered them. He said, run for your lives. Don't look back or stop. Escape, or you will be swept away. And what does Lot do? Lot hesitates. He hesitates. Why would he hesitate? Sometimes we're so caught into the cycle of sin and death. Sometimes we're so much a part of it, it's hard to see the way out. It's hard to see. And in the movie, They always kept saying this over and over again. It was one of the little phrases they used. They said this. They said, go in a straight line and don't look back. Jesus would say, go and sin no more. When God shows you a way out, take it. Don't hesitate. Run for all you're worth. Don't look back. What you're leaving is of no value. Go. Go. And he hesitated. See, that's probably the biggest part of grace that all of us forget at one time or another, is that God will offer you a way out, but God always offers you the choice, and it's up to you to take it. God offers you salvation. God offers you salvation, but God's not going to make you choose it. God will show you the way out. Sometimes God will grab you by the hand, but if you hesitate, if you look back, you become a part of the destruction that God's trying to save you from. And I think that's what happened to Lot's wife. Because if you read along in the story, they're running for all they're worth, and they believe God, and they're like, we got to get out of here, and destruction's coming, and they're running, and Lot's wife turns around and looks back, and she's turned into a pillar of salt. She becomes part of the judgment. Now, I don't know what it was. I don't know if she was so encultured to that way of being. She had so much there she was losing. I don't know what it was. She was caught in this cycle, and she felt she needed to be back there, not where God was leading them, and she made a choice, and God made an example. And I don't know if you feel me on this. I don't know if you feel like sometimes, like I know things are wrong. I know things are bad. I know I'm caught in a bad cycle where I keep making bad decisions over and over and over again. I know I'm a part of the problem, but I just don't know how to get away from it. You know, in the movie, Kyle Reese comes back to Sarah Connor, and he's talking to her, and she is so caught up in this cycle of being in a certain way of being. She's so caught in there that she thinks she kind of belongs in that, and she can't think any differently. He said, you know what, Sarah, you can choose the life you want, any life. And she said this, and I think this is us. What if I don't know how? What if I'm so a part of this bad cycle that I don't know how to be any other way? Do you feel me? Have you been caught in that cycle over and over again where you just do the same stupid things and the same bad things happen to you over and over again until where you kind of think you deserve to be there, right? You earned a place in that cycle, didn't you? You paid for it, and so, by God, I'm going to live this out best I know how right here. And you just lose hope, and you stick with it, even though you know it's just going to end in destruction. And you're always hesitant to make the choice to do something different for some reason that's comfortable to you. Someone devalued you, someone objectified you so much that you thought at some point, I belong here. And I'm here to tell you today that you have a choice. You can live any life you want. Any life. The choice has not been taken from you. In fact, that's why Jesus saved us, is to have that choice. The first thing you need to do is just identify the cycle you're in. You know, in the movie there, they go through this and they get caught in this loop and caught in this loop and caught in this loop, and they always have to kind of try to identify which cycle they're in because they're caught. And that's us when we caught in a cycle of sin over and over and over again. And sometimes it just becomes so a part of who we are that it's hard to find a way out of it, and it becomes a part of your identity. And the bad thing is that because it's a part of our identity and because we never stop to self-reflect and think, what part do I have to play in this? Where am I at? Why am I in this? Why do I think this way? Because of that, that cycle tends to infect our family. It gets passed on from generation to generation to generation. And I don't even want to tell you, I don't have the heart to tell you today what happened to Lot's family after that. Because even though God saved him, even though God let him out of that destruction and let him out of that judgment and showed him grace, he was still caught in the same bad way of thinking. His family was caught in the same bad way of thinking. And what resulted from that were two of the most evil nations history has ever seen. Because even though he had been broke free, he still had the cycle with him. He was carrying it with him over and over. His family had it over and over. So if we don't do any work to identify the cycle, we're never going to break free from it. Peter says this. He says, you know, some people can get saved. They can find salvation. They can accept Jesus. They can do all those things. And they find themselves back in the same old way of being over and over again. And then he quotes this proverb. He says, of them the proverbs are true. A dog returns to its vomit, and a sow that is washed returns to her wallowing in the mud. So what is it? What keeps dragging you back into the mud? Where do you keep getting caught in the same thing over and over and over again? Because if you don't identify the cycle, it's going to own you. And you're going to be that for the rest of your life. So what is it? Where do you, in the movie there was this thing they kept saying, that you need to find the nexus point. You got to find the nexus point. And and they described it as this. They said a nexus point is a time of such importance that it can change the future. And when you're identifying these cycles, you need to find the point in time when you bought into it. When you said, you know what? I belong here. This is me. I deserve this. When a point when someone either hurt you so bad or devalued you so bad that you thought you deserved to be in that cycle, or a point when you sold out to the values of that cycle so much that other people became less important than yourselves. When is it? It's hard. It's really hard to do. In fact, it's actually one of your next steps today. If you look on that little connection card you were handed earlier, look at that third next step on the back. It said, I will make a ruthless inventory of the harmful cycles in my life. What are they? Where do you keep getting caught? Where do you keep getting stuck? What keeps dragging you back through the mud over and over and over again? Because if you don't identify them, if you don't identify the nexus, you can never heal from it and never break free from it. You will always be caught in this hopeless cycle until you too experience that destruction in your life. And you know what I'm talking about. A lot of you know exactly what I'm talking about because you find yourself in the mud all the time. Even though you have Jesus, even though you've been saved, even though they've come and led you out of the destruction and out of the judgment, you're still part of that. You carried it with you. But it's not just about identifying the cycle. See, it's hard for us. It's hard for us to dig into that kind of stuff and really kind of identify what all of that's about. Even Paul, in the scriptures, he writes this. He says, I don't really understand myself, for I want to do what's right, but I don't do it. Instead, I do what I hate. Do you feel me? Does anybody feel that? Do you feel that in yourself, that I keep doing the stupid things that I hate over and over and over and over again? I keep finding myself in that cycle. We need to find an angel. We need somebody from the outside who's not part of our cycle to walk in and tell us what's wrong. Just like those angels did. And if necessary, we need someone who's going to grab you by the hand and drag you out and say, go, don't look back, leave this. We need angels in our lives. It's the why of church. We have to have angels in our lives. We have to have people that we trust enough. They're going to speak into our mess and say, listen, you got to go. Paul had to have it. Jesus had to stop him cold and save him, but people had to lead him out of those bad cycles of thinking. We have it. We have to have angels in our lives. And if you are stuck and you can't see it for yourself, you need to find somebody from the outside who can reach into your cycle and drag you out of it. We were blessed here recently, a couple weeks ago, as a bunch of Methodist pastors in our district, we went to all of the nonprofits in our area, and we went and visited all these nonprofits. It was like a tour all day long. And we went to this place, to one of the worst neighborhoods in this town. It's a place you don't want to be caught out after dark. Okay, it's that place. It's that neighborhood you don't want to be a part of. It's that neighborhood that you look at the people that live there and think less of them because they live there. But they didn't have a choice. They were born into it. And they're caught in this cycle of poverty that just feeds itself over and over and over again because there are no good jobs in this area because it's such a bad neighborhood. And no, everybody's too poor to afford a ride, so they can't get to a job even if there was one there. So they're stuck there, and their kids are born into this. And so gangs form and horrible things happen because of all this poverty. And they are caught in a cycle of poverty. And those kids have every bit as much value as our children. They just happen to be born right there, and they're caught in this. And it's the Lincoln Mill area, if you haven't been there. I don't recommend being there after dark. And right dead center in the middle of this cycle of poverty in our own town, there's a Boys and Girls Club, and it is a beacon of light because these kids It takes these kids off of the streets where they would get in trouble. It pulls them in while their parents are having to work 2 or 3 jobs to keep on their feet and to keep food in their house because they have to work these little minimum wage jobs that don't pay anything. These kids are taken off the street and taught things and taught how to be and taught character lessons and morals. And this Boys and Girls Club is this amazing place where these angels come every day and speak hope into these kids' lives and keep them off the street. And there's this one guy, he is the athletic director for the Boys and Girls Clubs for North Alabama, and he came from that neighborhood, and he went back, and his office is in that Boys and Girls Club. And he was showing us through, and he was so proud, and he was talking about the kids, and it was so awesome, and all these things, and he was talking about all the kids in the neighborhood, and we finally get outside, and it's near the end of the tour, and one of the pastors asked him, he said, okay, this is great. What you're doing here is awesome. It's amazing. You're helping break kids out of the cycle of poverty. You're really affecting this area. You're a light in this area. What can we do to help you? See, we always think we know what we can do to help, but we don't. So he asked, what can we do to help you? And this guy sat and thought for a second. He's very thoughtful. He said, you know, it's great when people give us money and resources and stuff. That's awesome, but that's not going to fix the problem. He said, education is right up there. If we can get these kids educated, we can break them out of the cycle of poverty. There's no doubt that is proven. We can do this, but their schools are horrible over here. We have a hard time getting kids out of these schools, and even if you do, it's hard to reinforce. You do a good job teaching them. It's hard to reinforce the lessons at home because their parents are gone. They have to work. He says, so education is great. If we can get them educated, awesome. He said, but what we need more than anything is we need you. We need relationships. We need you people to walk into our world and speak hope to us. We need you to speak hope to these kids. We need you to be angels. We need you to walk into our world and tell us how it can be different. Tell these kids that it doesn't have to be like this, that there is a better way to go, and that they can go that way and get out of this, that they can have hope, because most of them can't see it themselves. They just can't. They've lost hope of things being any different, and they need an angel. In the movie, Kyle says to Sarah, he says, you know what? The future is not set. You make it. And that's the message of angels. Your future, kid, because you were born into this, is not set. You make it. If you ever thought about working in a place like that, they need you. They need an angel to tell them things can be different. We need angels in our lives. We need people that will tell the truth to us, and that's one of your next steps on here. It says, I will reveal that cycle to someone I trust for prayer, encouragement, and accountability. And you can write angel right next to that. You need to find an angel. If you're going to break out of your cycle is every bit as valid as anybody else's. If you're going to break out of your cycle, you need to find someone that will tell you the future's not set. You make it. At the beginning of the movie, and I want you guys to see this movie. If you miss all the rest of it, don't miss the very beginning. Don't miss the very beginning, because Kyle is narrating. And he says this. He says, I was born into a broken world. We lifted that earlier. I was born into a broken world. And he's talking about his time where this thing had taken over so much, it was just destroying every life around him. He said, and then one man found me. And he saved me. And he lifted me up, and he taught me to fight back. He taught me to free the prisoners. He was a prophet, but he was so much more. He said this, and I think this is something we need to live with. He gave us all a future. I'm going to use mine. Once you're saved, once you've been shown the way, once you've taken that choice, once you've found angels that speak hope into your life and speak truth into your life, use your freedom. Become an angel yourself. Those just ones on the back wall, all those people that you wrote down that you think need God and need to break out of their cycles of bad behavior and things like that, all those people, they don't need you just to say a prayer for them and do something nice and sweet and hope maybe Jesus breaks into their life at some point. They need you to be their angels. They need you to speak into their lives. They need you to grab a hold of their hands and drag them out if you have to. That's what that just one thing is about. And if you think just throwing it up there and letting us all pray over it, that's not going to, God wants you to act on it. God wants you to be an angel. You can be an angel to people in your life. Now, if you got a problem and you're trying to work it out you need to work it out and find your own angel and do that. In fact, Jesus even says that. He says, if you've got some problems, you need to work those out first and then become someone's angel. Because you become a lot more graceful when you've been healed of it yourself. Paul says it this way. He says this, it's for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and don't let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. If you've been freed, you need to utilize your freedom. You need to become an angel to someone else. You know, if you look in your announcement sheet, there's a little sheet in there. It says Jobs for Life. You guys see that? Pull that out. The leadership of our church, we recognize the area we live in, that this church landed in. We recognize that there's such a wide variance in people's living situation here, that people come from abject poverty all the way up to upper class in this area, within a 5-mile radius of this church. And we recognize that this place, that we've been placed here as a church to become angels to this area. We're supposed to be healed, and then we're supposed to go out and become the angels to the people in this area. And we do a lot of good things that speak hope into people's lives, but we need to be their angels. That's what this Job for Life is. It's a training program for people who are struggling to find employment or underemployed, and it's a training program where we hook up with prospective employers and we walk them through this 8 weeks of training where they become hireable by good employers that will give them good work and break them out of that cycle that they find themselves caught in. And we get to be a part of that. That's what Jobs for Life is. And if you need a job, if you're struggling to find a job and you find yourself unemployed all the time, you're caught in that cycle over and over again, sign up for this. Sign up for this. You need to be in this. It's about 8 weeks long. It's 2 nights a week. We have child care. We'll feed you. All those things. Sign up for this. If you know somebody who needs this, who is constantly finding themselves unemployed or underemployed, and they need this, and they need people to speak into their lives and help them become, and hook them up with the right connections and everything, take this to them and help them sign up for it and bring it back to us. Because there's an application process. We're going to start this in September. So this is going to be a great thing. But if you want to be an angel, on the back, if you want to help, if you want to volunteer, we need people who will help with childcare. We need people for snacks. If you are a potential employer or you work for one, we need those. So mark this form up. We're going to collect it in just a second with our offering. Mark this form up. If you will help anywhere needed, mark this form. You can be an angel to some people that desperately need one to break out of whatever cycle they find themselves in. So that's what this church is about. That's what we're here for. When the offering bucket comes by, you take that and your connection card, mark that up however you want to put it in that bucket when it comes by you. If you're a guest here today, please understand that our offering, if I can get the praise team, go ahead and come forward. Our offering is for people to consider Crosswinds Church their church home. And so if you're here today, don't feel manipulated or pushed or anything to give to the mission that we're performing.